right. Got the hip hop beats going in the background. Turn my feedback or my mic or whatever down. Add a bit of air. I think the air helps my voice quality a bit. I don't know. But it's a button on the thing, so I push it and it's air. I don't know. But no candle today, cause cause this video is not right after therapy. Um, yeah, but it's still gonna be just about my life. Oh, that was probably hard to like. That's what the pop filters for ASMR. Thank you. And what was I talking about? Oh yeah, no candle. And this is just gonna be a normal video about me talking about stuff. So what do I want to talk about? Well, I don't have much time because I'm waiting for the food I ordered to arrive. So it better not be super deep. But one of the things that I've been thinking about for the past 2 days, give or take, is an interesting exchange I had with my students. So I teach not English. This was particularly in my business class that I teach. So basically it's business and introduction to business and business leadership, business management. Because all these are little rich kids whose families own companies and they eventually want their kids to take over their companies. So they pay me to teach them how to do so. Now, when it comes to business management for them, one, they're little rich kids. They've never worked a day in their life. So a lot of the concepts are a bit difficult for them to latch onto, like, hey, what's a corporate culture? Or, hey, does it mean for a company to be socially responsible? Or all these kind of things. Or just the idea that they're going to be taking over Chinese companies. And ASMR. The fact that their parents have owned Chinese companies, but they want their kids to kind of expand the company into like onto the international stage, because all these kids speak very good English. But their culture is kind of working against them on this, because since they have grown up in kind of like this Chinese bubble, right? Because China is still very much so a bubble. Not a lot of outside is allowed in, and honestly, not a lot of inside is allowed out. So when it comes to understanding foreign concepts in relation to business, they are really at a disadvantage. And so, one of the things that I've introduced actually quite a few of my students on is I have to be the one, lucky me, to introduce them to this concept of racism in business, and the fact that when they're outside of China, they are a race of people and not a very well looked upon race. Like, as you know, on top of that, they're certainly not black people, like nowhere near that level of struggle. But for example, let me think. On one of the tests that I gave them, they had a question where it was like they had to pick true or false, and they had to tell me whether or not this company was acting ethically or not, because we were talking about business ethics and ethical dilemmas and all this kind of thing. So they had to tell me whether or not a business was acting ethically or not. Now, keep in mind, I did not develop this curriculum. It was given to me, and I teach it. So one of the questions was like, a restaurant does not sit patrons of color in a certain section. And all of them were like, yeah, this is true. They're acting ethically. And then when they got the question wrong, they all came to me and they were like, what? Teacher, what? Why is this wrong? And I was like, well, because I'm like, this is obvious. Like, they're purposefully not sitting people of color in a certain section of the restaurant. Therefore, they're keeping this restaurant for only white people. And they're like, but white is a color. So, and that really took me by surprise, because I didn't, it's just so weird to genuinely see this point of view, like someone that has genuinely never in their life been exposed to the fact that they are a different race and that there is a hierarchy, very much so, to the races, and the fact that they are a person of color, and that white people are not people of color. And they had a good point because they're like, well, white is a color. They're white. We're yellow. This is them saying this, not me. In China, it is still very much so okay for you to for you to call yourself yellow. And in fact, a lot of the older generation still think of them, like very much so think of themselves and the world as like only five groups of people, five colors. You've got the yellow people, the white people, the black people, the brown people, and I think there's like one more, like the red people. There you go. So so saying that they're yellow is no big deal for them. So please don't hate me. This is literally what they say. So they were like, it's just all of the colors. And I was just like, no, sweetie. White, you are considered a variation. White is considered the default. And they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And that was just so weird for me. Because, one, I feel bad. I'm going to have to introduce racism to these poor kids. But, and not racism, but the idea that they are outside of East Asia considered a variation thereupon. Like, and that white is considered, the original, and everything else is just kind of like painted in. And so I had to sit there and I had to explain to them kind of like, yeah, well, this and the Western world, like outside of China, because literally everyone else knows this, but you guys have closed yourself off for so long that you are kind of really horribly unaware. Ooh, hey, ASMR. But this is how it is. When you leave the safety of the China bubble, you will be a person of color. And you're going to have to take on all the responsibilities and the stereotypes and the unfair expectations that go along with being your particular color. But they just couldn't get around this idea that white is the default. And that was just such an interesting thing that they were like zeroing in on. They're like, why white? Why white? Why white? And I'm like, history. Like history, plain and simple. But like the thing that's interesting is in China. No, let me start over. Chinese history is taught as their main central focus history, as it should be, because we are in China. But it goes even farther back to like even the name of China in Mandarin, 中国. 中 means middle, 国 means country, middle country. So the ancient Chinese actually did think of themselves as like the middle of the world, because in a certain sense they were. They were literally Rome before Rome was ever even a thing. Like they were the ancient Greeks of Asia. I would argue a little bit more, I would say, but there are going to be history buffs that will battle me on that. Ancient China is awesome. More people should study it. And so this idea that they are central, that it is them, and that kind of almost everything around them descends from them, which is problematic, I know, but I don't create the Chinese education curriculum. So for them to wrap their heads around this idea that you are not the center, that in fact in most of the world you are considered a default, no, sorry, not a default, a variation, is extremely difficult for them. And it's honestly something that they will not understand until they leave the comfort and safety of China for an extended period of time. Because they've been out. Of course they've been out. Like they've been on vacations to Europe. They've been on vacation to America. They went to Los Angeles because literally every Chinese person that goes to America goes to Los Angeles or New York. That's it. Those are like the only two places they go. I ask so many people when they find out I'm from America. They're like, oh yeah, I've been to America. Where'd you go? LA? Like that is for some reason. And then no, and I've asked them, I'm like, why do you guys all go to LA, like this one place? And they're like, oh, because there are a lot of Chinese people there. Well, if you want Chinese people, stay in China. Like, what? Why would you? I don't understand. I don't understand. Like, literally, if you want Chinese people so badly, why bother leaving China? That's like me leaving America and going to live in, I don't know, there's no place like America. I don't, just like a kind of mini America, right? Like, I just, that doesn't do anything to help you really understand the culture or the difference or anything like that. Kind of defeats the purpose of traveling, but whatever, that's just what they do here. So they want the familiarity. Like Chinese, like since they live in this bubble, they're very, very reluctant to kind of step out of the bubble. And this is by no means all Chinese people, but I will say on average, they are much slower to stepping out of their comfort zone than people I have met from other countries. Like, say, for example, people from Europe. They're fine. They're just like, oh yeah, no, I'm here. Like, even people from like Nigeria or Zimbabwe or a lot of South Africa, other African countries, they're just like, yeah, no, I'm here. Yeah, no. But when it comes to a Chinese person leaving the safety of China, they get a little, yeah. So, and it's by no means everybody, but there is this reluctance. So they just had a really difficult time wrapping their heads around them, and I explained to them, according to history, white people are the winners. And winners, ASMR, winners. So the winners write the history books. And since so much of our culture has been forced upon us by Europeans, and so much of other people's culture was stripped away by Europeans who were in fact white, they just inserted themselves as the default and created literature and standards and all these kind of things where everyone else that was not white was considered a variation. And then once again, since they do not study history, like non-Chinese history, this is coming as a huge shock to them, because they may vaguely know, they're like, yeah, World War II is a thing, but they really only learn about it in terms of like Japan and China. Chinese hate Japanese. What time? How much 12 minutes? More on that later. But this is a crazy thing. They know not much about World War I. They know world wars happened. The second one is more significant because that's when the Japanese did a bunch of terrible things. They kind of know US history, but not really. They know there was a civil war at some point. They kind of know there were slaves at some point. England has a queen. France has baguettes. Australia has white people too for some reason. Like they just like they don't know. Like these are literally like the same group of people. Not my students in particular, but like in China, that will look at me and question the fact that I'm American. Like they're like, there are black people in America? Yes, yes, there are. Why? Well, how much time do you have? Like you can get the short answer or the long answer, but you know. And so this is probably one of the hardest things I've had to deal with when it comes to teaching Chinese students, is this big gap. Like this huge knowledge gap. Because even if you don't really go to school in any kind of, you know, and here they call them Western countries, because you remember China, Central, so they do the center, the West, and the East. They still very much so think of themselves as the center. So Western countries, the knowledge you would acquire just via the cultural lexicon would be enough to get you by, but they never acquired this knowledge. So literally almost anything I reference in class just goes right over their heads. Like they just don't know. And that's really frustrating, especially since this is a curriculum designed by Canadians for Canadians. And so one of the hardest things is me filling in like all these gaps. And if something as small as like, and not really, well now it is, but openly stated that there's definitely a racial hierarchy, like if something like that big, that well known is unknown to them, then you can just imagine everything else I am filling in. in like over the course of a course, right? So that was just something that really stood out to me this week, where I literally had to take a moment, and it was really like reinforced upon me that these kids just grow up in a completely different world. Like, I can't even imagine a world where I was not aware of my blackness, or I was not aware of how my blackness is perceived and my quote unquote rank in this hierarchy. I just can't imagine a world like that, because that's literally been my entire existence, even before I was born. Like, the moment a black woman is pregnant with a black child, the black child is stereotyped and has these expectations. It's true. So that was just, yeah, kind of a surreal teaching moment, and I get those periodically here. Just another one was when a student came up to me and basically started with like questions about abortion. And because we had read something, this was a different class, it wasn't the business course, but like he asked me, he was like, why do people in America think abortion is such a big deal? And I had to step back for a moment, because I was just like, what do you mean? Of course, like, it was just one of the most hot button issues in America for like forever, but bubble, right? Oh, my food is here. I have to go answer the door. Pause. All right, my food's downstairs. Haven't eaten it yet, but yeah, I don't even know where I left. Oh yeah, abortion. That fun topic. Demonetized already. I don't get any money from this anyway. What the fuck am I saying? But yeah, he was just like, why is abortion such a big deal? And I was like, what is it in your perspective? And he was like, what you know, if you don't want to have a kid, or if you get pregnant and like you've already had a kid and you just get an abortion and that's it. And I had to take a moment and step back and really examine his reality. China had the one-child policy. Now it is the two-child policy. ASMR tapping. For him, he has grown up in an environment where you get pregnant and you already have your children, you get an abortion. Or if you're willing to pay the really high fee to have an extra child, you do that. Excuse me. Or he has also grown up in an environment where abortion clinics are advertised like massage parlors. Like, I never forget, like, the first time I saw an advertisement, and I genuinely thought it was like a place where you get Botox or something. And no, it was an abortion clinic, but like every abortion came with a free facial. Like, you would never see that kind of thing in the United States. I don't even know if you would see that kind of thing in Europe. And I'm just like, okay, well, what do these places have in common? Ah, yes. Christianity, religion, all that. China is very interesting because China was only very briefly involved with Christianity, and they realized that it was terrible, and they quickly swept that out of the country. They're like, no, you guys are bad news, get out and never return. And so they've also worked towards really kind of stamping out all religion in China. Not stamping out, but just making sure that people understand it's like, hey, this is a thing you guys can do, but don't get too crazy. And one of the things the Chinese government is very much so zeroed in on is the fact that Christianity kind of makes people crazy from their point of view. From their point of view. Because imagine I've had to explain Christianity so many times, and I'm not even Christian, but I've had to explain the ideas of Christianity so many times to Chinese people, and they just look at me and go, what? So, for example, when I was younger and the whole Pokemon or demon things came out, I explained how, like, pastors and preachers and stuff were saying, like, Pokemon is the devil, and it's the devil, your children should never play with this. And my Chinese friends are like, but it's a show for children. They're animated creatures. Why is this evil? And I was like, but it's like a demon, Satan. And they're just looking at me like, it's a show for children. What? Okay, couldn't explain that. All right. So, jumping to something else. I remember one of my Chinese friends asking me why, like, I don't know. Oh, right, like images of religious figures, because I think we were talking about Christianity and Muslims, but Christians in general, they're like, you guys always put, like, what is it with the image of Jesus and, like, him being tortured? And that's, like, the main thing you guys show. Like, you guys always show people being tortured. And I'm like, wait, no, we don't. But then you think about it, yeah, we kind of do. And she was just like, that's really weird. Your religion is very violent if almost all the images you show are of people being tortured. And I'm like, it's not all the images. But from what she'd seen, yeah, because she's, one of the major holidays is about a person dying. I think that person comes back, but it's still predominantly about death. And so, or like, like Sodom and Gomorrah, destroying an entire city. Or, I was about to say Prince of Egypt. I love that movie, by the way, but like story in Exodus. Kill all the firstborn children. She was like, your religion is very violent. And I'm like, I had no response to that because I can't say it's not, because there are quite a few very violent stories in the Bible. And yeah, I don't know. I didn't know how to respond to that. I was just like, oh, I mean, yeah. So, versus like Buddhism, which, to my knowledge at least, doesn't have that many violent stories. I'm sure they exist. I know there are violent stories in Hinduism for sure. But there's not a lot of Hindus in China. No, there's kind of watered down Buddhism in China. In certain parts. Certain parts, you get full-blown Buddhism. What even is full-blown Buddhism? But yeah, so it's just this gap, like in explaining Christianity, elements of Christianity, and the Christian thinking process to someone that has never known or been involved in that process is really interesting to see the contrast. So, yeah, as moments like that are why I like living here. I get challenged a lot. I get challenged in my basic beliefs. I get challenged in my assumptions. I get challenged in my ideologies all the time. It's uncomfortable. It truly is. And sometimes it's just absolutely just frustrating and makes me so angry because people here do think so different than kind of the rest of the world. I'm not saying the rest of the world, but even like people in Japan and Korea kind of understand our vibe, right? Like a Japanese person kind of knows what Americans are about, right? Even if they've never been to America or have met an American before in their life, they kind of get it. Even someone from the Philippines, yeah, we have a military base there. We have a military base in Japan. We have military bases everywhere. Maybe that's why. That's another topic for another day. But yeah, they just don't have that frame of reference. And seeing and meeting an entire group of people that don't have that frame of reference is so fascinating, and I believe there's a lot that can be learned from it if you're willing to put up with all the frustration and anger and just trying to explain what you feel like are just obvious basic concepts like racism. Or everyone knows about that. Some people claim it doesn't exist, whatever, but at least it is known. But to them it's not. Unless it's happening to them. Then they know all about it. That's a topic for another time. So many topics for another time. But anyway, my food is here. I want to go eat. I have work tomorrow. I have work every day. I never have a break. These are my breaks. This is like kind of sort of the only times I get to just sit down. I don't know whether to be happy or to be sad, but because I'm doing things that I like. But it is exhausting. So let's go eat, watch a couple YouTube videos, and then go to bed and do it all again tomorrow. That's all you can do. Get that purse, get that grind. All right. Bye. I'm ending my videos. Bye. Yeah, because I got that one I have 2 old people that commented on the video. So for you guys.